A woman named Isabelle Turner is called back to her childhood home after the sudden death of her estranged father. Upon her return, she discovers cryptic clues in his belongings that suggest her father was involved in a dark secret, something linked to the disappearance of her younger sister, Emma, 15 years ago. Isabelle must now confront her past, unravel her father's hidden life, and uncover the truth about Emma's disappearance before the past catches up with her. Before we dive into this gripping story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you love stories packed with mystery and drama, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. There's so much more coming your way. Isabelle Turner sat at her kitchen table, the dim light of the overhead lamp casting shadows on the envelope she held in her hands. The letter had arrived just that morning, but it already felt like an unwelcome intruder. The neat handwriting on the front read, Isabelle Turner, Inheritance Notice, from the estate of Robert Turner. She hadn't spoken to her father in over 15 years. Their relationship had been strained long before she left Westbrook for Chicago, before she left everything behind. The pain of Emma's disappearance still lingered, and the wounds from her family's past were too deep to ever heal. She'd buried those memories. At least she thought she had. Her hands trembled as she opened the letter. The words were short and to the point, confirming her father's sudden death from a heart attack. But then came the unexpected clause, "You are required to attend the reading of the will in person. Please arrive by Friday, 2 p.m. Isabelle's heart sank. She had never wanted to return to Westbrook, not after Emma vanished without a trace, not after the way things had ended with her father. Yet here she was, faced with the impossible decision of confronting her past once again. She sighed deeply, staring out the window at the city skyline in the distance. She had built a life in Chicago, one far removed from the darkness of her childhood. The idea of returning to that small, haunted town was unbearable. But as much as she wanted to ignore it, the pull of family, of whatever ties remained, was too strong to resist. With a reluctant breath, Isabelle stood, grabbed her jacket, and walked out the door. The flight to Westbrook would be short, but the weight of the journey would feel endless. The flight from Chicago to Westbrook felt surreal. As Isabelle looked out of the small airplane window, she could see the familiar green hills and sprawling forests of her hometown, but nothing about the landscape felt comforting. Westbrook had always been a small, quiet town, its picturesque nature hiding darker secrets. Isabelle had spent her childhood here, but after Emma's disappearance, she'd never been able to bring herself back. The moment the plane touched down on the small runway, Isabelle was filled with a strange mixture of nostalgia and dread. She had promised herself years ago that she would never set foot here again, but now she had no choice. As she made her way from the airport to her family home, memories flooded her mind, of a time when things were simpler, before everything changed. The house stood as a silent monument to her past, the tall, aging structure looming in the distance. It was the same house she and Emma had grown up in, where they had played in the backyard, spent holidays, and dreamed of a future that had never come. But Isabelle knew the truth. Emma had been taken from her, from their family. No one had ever found her. No one had ever gotten close to finding out what happened. And Isabelle had been forced to live with the guilt that she had never been able to protect her sister. When Isabelle stepped inside the house, the familiar creak of the wooden floors beneath her feet made her shiver. The scent of old wood, dust, and the faint hint of cologne lingered in the air. It was strange being back, and yet, everything felt like it had been frozen in time. The house was empty, just as it had been when she left. There was no warmth here, no laughter. Only silence. Isabelle walked cautiously into the living room, where a small desk sat in the corner, cluttered with papers. The house seemed like it hadn't changed in years. She walked over and picked up a few scattered items, some old newspapers, a letter unopened for years. There, among the scattered papers, was a worn, leather-bound journal. It didn't belong to her, she could tell by the familiar handwriting on the first page. To Robert, with love. 1985. Her heart skipped a beat. It was her father's journal. Isabelle hesitated before opening it, the weight of the past pressing down on her shoulders. As Isabelle flipped through the pages of the journal, she found a strange mix of everyday life and cryptic notes. There were mentions of family gatherings, local events, and mundane details about the house. But as she reached the later entries, the tone shifted. Her father's handwriting became more erratic, almost frantic at times. One entry, dated just 2 months before Emma's disappearance, caught Isabelle's attention. "I've made a terrible mistake. I don't know how to undo it, but the past keeps coming back to haunt me. I'm not sure how long I can keep it hidden. Emma, she's too smart for her own good. She knows something, but I can't let her find out. Not yet." Isabelle's pulse quickened. The entry was short, but its implications were profound. What had her father meant? Was this connected to Emma's disappearance? Had her father known something he hadn't shared? She kept reading, hoping to find more answers, but the journal suddenly stopped. The last entry was from over 2 years ago, with no explanation. Just more cryptic phrases, more secrets buried deep within her father's thoughts. Isabelle closed the journal, her hands trembling. She had no idea what this meant, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her father's death wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something much darker. As Isabelle continues her search through the house, she discovers a hidden passageway leading to a secret room in the basement. Inside the room, she finds more documents and photographs, revealing her father's involvement in something far more sinister than she could have ever imagined. Isabelle couldn't shake the feeling that her father's journal had been pointing her toward something much darker. The cryptic entries seemed to suggest he knew more than he had ever let on, and the references to Emma were becoming too frequent to ignore. She couldn't stop thinking about the last sentence she'd read. "Emma, she's too smart for her own good. She knows something, but I can't let her find out. Not yet." It had been years since Emma had vanished, but the weight of that statement hung heavily in the air. Isabelle had thought she was the one who had been kept in the dark, but now, it seemed like her father might have been hiding something connected to Emma's disappearance. Unable to focus on the journal any longer, Isabelle decided to take a break. She walked around the house, letting the silence sink in. Every corner, every creak of the floorboards, seemed to echo with memories of her childhood. But one thing stood out to her. Her father had always been secretive, even when they were young. There had been talk of a hidden room in the house when Isabelle was a child, but it had always been dismissed as family legend. Her father had never confirmed it, but neither had he denied it. Now, Isabelle couldn't ignore the possibility that such a room existed. And if it did, it might hold the answers she needed. Her heart raced as she went through the house, opening drawers, searching for hidden compartments, until she finally found something. It was a small, worn-out wooden panel in the floor of the study, almost invisible, tucked under the rug where the desk sat. Isabelle knelt down, running her fingers along the edges of the panel. It gave slightly when she pressed against it. With a quick motion, she pried it open, revealing a narrow set of stairs leading down into the dark. The air grew heavier, colder, as she descended into the basement. The dim light of her phone barely cut through the gloom. The basement was just as she remembered it, stale and musty, filled with boxes of forgotten memories. But in the far corner, behind a stack of old crates, Isabelle noticed something odd. The wall was different from the others. She pushed aside the crates, revealing a bricked-up doorway. A rush of excitement and dread flooded her at once. Could this be the hidden room her father had kept so carefully concealed all these years? Her hands trembling, she searched around the basement for something that might allow her to break through the wall. Finally, she found an old crowbar tucked inside a box of tools. With a deep breath, Isabelle began to pry at the bricks. They were loose but thick, and it took several minutes of hard work before one of the bricks gave way. She continued, each one feeling like a new layer of her father's secrets being exposed, until, finally, the last brick crumbled. The wall was gone. Isabelle stepped into the small, hidden room. It was damp and cold, but it was filled with things that made her stomach twist. Old files, boxes of photographs, and several large, sealed containers stacked against the far wall. There was a desk in the center of the room, its surface covered in piles of paper. Her breath caught in her throat as she walked over to the desk. The first thing she noticed was a framed photograph of her father, taken long before Emma's disappearance. But beside him in the picture was someone Isabelle didn't recognize. A woman, standing close to him, her face slightly obscured. The photo had been taken at a private party, the kind of gathering Isabelle had never been allowed to attend. She picked it up, examining it more closely. There was something about the woman's eyes that sent a shiver down Isabelle's spine. There was a hidden danger there, something that felt familiar. But before Isabelle could make sense of the photo, her eyes landed on something even more chilling. There, in the middle of the desk, was an old ledger, its pages yellowed with age. Isabelle opened it, her hands trembling. The first few pages were filled with what appeared to be names and dates, and as she flipped through, the names became more and more familiar, names of people who had disappeared in Westbrook over the years. The ledger even listed Emma's name, written in black ink, alongside a date that matched the day she had vanished. Isabelle's stomach twisted into knots. Her father had been involved in this, she realized. But in what way? And why was Emma's name listed here? Isabelle couldn't breathe. The weight of the ledger felt like 1,000 pounds in her hands, and the truth she had feared was beginning to unravel in front of her. Her father wasn't just involved in the disappearance of local girls, he was orchestrating it. This organization, this secret life that he had hidden from her, was far darker than she could have imagined. She flipped through the pages more quickly now, desperate for answers. But as she turned the page, her heart nearly stopped. There, at the bottom of the page, was a final entry. Emma Turner, deceased. June 22, 2005. Disappearance, location, unknown. Status, unresolved. Isabelle couldn't comprehend it. Emma, the deceased? This couldn't be right. It had to be some mistake. Emma wasn't dead. Isabelle remembered the police investigation, the flyers, the news reports. They had searched for years, but no body had ever been found. No one had ever confirmed Emma's death. But there it was in black and white, her sister's name listed among the others. Isabelle was now certain that her father knew far more than he had let on, and that he had kept Emma's death a secret for a reason. But what if Emma was never dead? What if she was still out there? Isabelle decides to confront the only person who might have answers, Detective Julian Price, the local officer who had worked on Emma's case all those years ago. Together, they begin to dig deeper, and the truth becomes even more terrifying than Isabelle could have imagined. Isabelle couldn't shake the feeling that the answers she was looking for weren't here in this hidden room. No matter how many pages she turned in her father's ledger, no matter how many photographs and files she uncovered, nothing was making sense. The story her father had been weaving, the secrets he had buried, seemed to stretch far beyond his death. Her mind raced. Emma's name was in that ledger. And yet, the official reports had never confirmed her death. The police had never found her body. Could it be that Emma had been alive all this time? Was her father involved in something even more disturbing than Isabelle could have ever imagined? She couldn't sit in this room any longer. She had to find someone who could help her make sense of it all. Someone who had been there from the beginning. Someone who had been on the case when Emma had disappeared. The name that came to her mind was Detective Julian Price. He had been a young officer at the time, and even though he was now retired, Isabelle knew he had never stopped caring about the case. He had always believed there was more to Emma's disappearance, and he had never given up looking for answers. Isabelle didn't waste a second. She grabbed her phone and dialed the number she had saved in her contacts. After a few rings, a voice came through, gravelly with age but still recognizable. "Detective Price," the voice answered. "It's been a long time." "Detective, it's Isabelle Turner," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need your help. I need to know the truth about what happened to Emma." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Isabelle could almost feel the detective weighing his words, deciding how much to reveal. "You've got some questions, don't you?" he finally said. "I've been waiting for you to come around, Isabelle. You've always had the right to know, but some things are better left buried." Isabelle's heart pounded in her chest. She had to know. She couldn't leave things to chance. Not after everything she had uncovered. "I'm coming to see you. I need to hear everything. I need to understand what happened to Emma, and why my father's name is tied to it." There was another pause. Then, softly, Detective Price spoke again. "I'll meet you at the station. 9 a.m. sharp. I'll be waiting." The next morning, Isabelle arrived at the police station as promised, her nerves twisted into tight knots. The building was old, its faded paint reflecting the age of the town itself. As she walked inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and old paperwork. She had spent hours here as a child, waiting for updates that never came, trying to understand why no one could find her sister. Now, she had no choice but to confront the truth that had been hidden for so long. Detective Price was waiting for her in the small office in the back of the station. His once broad shoulders were hunched with age, and his graying hair gave him a weary, worn look. But his eyes were still sharp, still filled with the same intensity they had held when he was first assigned to Emma's case. He motioned for Isabelle to sit. Without a word, he slid a folder across the desk to her. "I didn't want you to come here," he said quietly, "but now that you have, there's no turning back. You deserve to know what happened to Emma and to your father. I owe you that much." Isabelle opened the folder. Inside were photographs, grainy and blurry, but still haunting. They were taken on the night Emma disappeared. But as Isabelle examined them, she noticed something odd. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no clues. Instead, there were images of Emma walking down a path in the woods near their house, her expression distant, her eyes dark. "What is this?" Isabelle asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "These were taken the night she disappeared, weren't they?" "Yes," Detective Price confirmed, his voice thick with regret. "But what's more important is what happened afterward. You see, Isabelle, we never found Emma's body. That much is true. But we did find something that your father was involved with. A group. A secretive, dangerous group." Isabelle's heart raced. Her father? A group? What was he involved in? "I need to hear everything," Isabelle demanded, leaning forward. Price sighed, rubbing his temples as if the weight of the past was too much to bear. "Your father had ties to a network, local businessmen, influential figures in Westbrook. They weren't just concerned with making money. They were involved in something much darker. Something that took Emma. She knew something. She found out something she shouldn't have." Isabelle's breath caught in her throat. What did she find out? What happened to her? Price hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Finally he spoke. "I think Emma was going to expose them. I think she knew they were trafficking young women, Isabelle. It was more than just business deals and investments. It was something far worse. And when she found out, they couldn't let her live." Isabelle shook her head, her mind reeling. "No, this can't be true. My father, he was part of this." Price nodded gravely. "He was, Isabelle. He was. But he didn't want you to know. He didn't want you to know what he was a part of. So he did everything he could to cover it up. And he tried to bury the truth with Emma." Tears blurred Isabelle's vision as the weight of his words sank in. Her father had been hiding a terrible secret. And now, the truth was finally out in the open. Isabelle confronts her father's old associates, unraveling a network of lies and betrayals that go back years. But someone is still watching, and the deeper she digs, the more dangerous it becomes. Isabelle is closer than ever to discovering Emma's fate, but at what cost? Isabelle's mind was spinning. Every word Detective Price spoke sent another jolt through her already fractured sense of reality. Her father, a man she had loved and trusted, had been involved in something far darker than she could have ever imagined. A network of powerful individuals, all connected to Emma's disappearance. She could feel the walls closing in around her, the pressure mounting with each new revelation. But she couldn't stop now. She couldn't let her father's actions remain hidden any longer. Emma deserved the truth. Isabelle deserved the truth. "You said there were others involved," Isabelle pressed, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and desperation. "Who else? Who was my father working with?" Price hesitated again, his weathered face tight with tension. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as though he was about to share the most dangerous part of the story. "It wasn't just local businessmen, Isabelle. It was much bigger than that. People from outside the town, outside the state. They were moving women, from all over. Young girls, teens, people who wouldn't be missed," Price said, his voice low, almost a whisper. Isabelle recoiled, her stomach turning. She had always known there was something off about the wealthy elites in their town, but to think they were involved in human trafficking, it was too much. She had never considered the possibility that her father was tied to something so horrifying. But Emma, why her? Isabelle asked, her voice breaking. Why was she targeted? What did she know? Price sighed heavily, his eyes darkening as he looked at the floor. Emma was smarter than most people gave her credit for. She started asking the wrong questions, digging into things that she didn't fully understand. She saw too much. And when she started putting the pieces together, your father knew he had to act before she exposed everything. Isabelle's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process what she was hearing. Her father, the man who had raised her, the man she had looked up to, had played a role in this. And Emma, her sister, her best friend, had been caught in the middle of it all. The cold, hard truth was sinking in. Emma hadn't just disappeared. She had been taken. Taken because she had gotten too close to the truth. I need to know where she is, Isabelle whispered, her voice shaking with the force of the realization. I need to know what happened to her. Price looked at her, his expression grim. I've been trying to find out for years. The group your father was involved with, they have resources. They cover their tracks. I've been digging, trying to get close, but I've always been one step behind. Emma's disappearance is tied to a larger network, and I'm not sure anyone can take it down. But I'm not giving up. Isabelle's resolve hardened. She wasn't going to let her father's sins swallow her whole. She wasn't going to sit idly by while the truth about Emma remained buried. No matter how dangerous it was, she had to finish what Emma had started. I'm going to expose them, Isabelle declared, her voice steady with newfound determination. I'm going to find Emma and bring the people responsible for this to justice. Price watched her for a moment, weighing her words. Then, with a heavy sigh, he nodded. I'll help you, Isabelle. But be careful. You're dealing with people who will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. They have eyes everywhere. One wrong move, and you could end up just like your father. Isabelle swallowed hard but didn't back down. She had already lost too much. She wouldn't lose her sister too. Isabelle knew the stakes had never been higher. If she was going to uncover the truth about Emma's disappearance, she had to go deeper than she ever had before. She had to confront the men who were behind it all, the ones who had kept Emma, and so many others, locked away in the dark corners of their twisted world. That evening, Isabelle and Detective Price met again in secret. He had a lead. A name. A person who might know where Emma was, and what had happened to her. The name he gave her sent chills down her spine. Victor Hale. Hale was one of the key figures in the trafficking ring that Price had been investigating for years. He was ruthless, a powerful figure in the underground world of human exploitation. No one had ever been able to pin anything on him. But Isabelle had no choice. If Hale knew where Emma was, then she had to confront him, no matter the cost.